Right. Well, greetings to everybody. And I've got an interesting guest today. Bit of a sort of blast from my past, if you will, which is UKIP, the new leader of UKIP. Um, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself, a little bit where the party is going. And I will interject by and by where I think I can add some value. And because if you remember, back in 2014, UKIP was a major force. It was a major force. It had as many votes, UKIP, at the general election as Reform does today, around about the 4 million mark. So it's a very powerful party of its day. And of course, when I was in it, the very last European election that we had, UKIP swept the board and got more votes than anybody else in its entirety. And I think perhaps I might say UKIP was one of the first true grassroots parties since the Labour Party of the Edwardian era. It was a grassroots party. And I have some, personally for me, I thought it was a mistake to try and professionalize it because it was such a good grassroots party and spoke for real people that bringing in all sorts of people, which is what happened in the latter stages of UKIP, who I'd never heard of, some of whom are really quite van ordinaire. And so we lost, I think, we lost that wonderful touch of spirit of grassroots parties. And my goodness me, if ever we needed a grassroots party today, we really, really do. More than ever. More than ever. So, Nick, over to you. Tell us about yourself and tell us about UKIP and where it's going and how you see the future.
Certainly. Thanks very much, Godfrey. Thanks for giving up your time to speak with me. So for those of you that don't know, I'm the Chief Operations Officer for a conservative activist organisation called Turning Point UK. Just hit my 3rd year anniversary mark. And that was about making sure that our students on our campuses in our universities in the UK had an outlet, had a voice against the far left Marxist agenda that's being run through our institutions and also specifically towards our grassroots though. So that means tabling on campuses, that means putting yourself on the front line against far left attacks, having conversations and debates with people. But unfortunately, the far left are incredibly uncompromising. So it does mean putting yourself in harm's way. And the sole objective was to raise awareness about far left indoctrination, Marxist indoctrination. So that's been for about 3 years. Earlier this year, I was dissolving my relationship with the Conservative Party when it was made very clear to me, regardless of my disdain for the leadership and also for their policies and the fact that they are not even centre-right, they're not certainly not right-wing where I am, it was made very clear to me that left-wing activists within the party were trying to oust me and that I was never going to progress. So I turned my head to UKIP, UKIP turned their head to me, and now I'm the interim leader. So that's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing. In terms of the UKIP history, Godfrey's in one of the best positions to explain the good, the bad, and the ugly. He's absolutely spot on with his summary. And there's a lot of people out there who were very sad to see UKIP decline in many ways. And that's for a number of different reasons. Potentially, it was to do with the leader who was elected. There's all sorts of things wrong with it. But the key thing to note about UKIP's decline is that as a one policy party, when Nigel left, the brand left, the donors left, the database left, because it was Nigel's show. It was Nigel's party. I'd argue we don't even have Brexit done in terms of the legislation side of things, ECHR, Human Rights Act, 1951, 1998. There are these things that pin us into bureaucratic tyranny at supranational level, which undermines sovereignty and is one of the key sources of our collective decline now in the UK. So I'd argue we don't even have it yet. So UKIP was alive and well, for all of those that you don't know and those that you do. And it's a brand with presence. It's a brand that stands to be the voice of the voiceless for the most patriotic within society. So the plan now is to reignite and relaunch the brand. In a nutshell, that is the plan. So we're talking about fresh leadership, personified by myself, the vision, which is our missions, of which there are 6, which I'd happily talk through with your audience. And then, of course, there's our updated manifesto as well. And I don't think you can be any fairer on the populist than to say, do you believe in the leadership of a party? Do you believe in its missions? And have you potentially had a little look at the manifesto where you can glean what the policies look like? That's going to be our approach to those people who aren't even potentially registered to vote because they're so disillusioned with politics, mainly because they don't like what they see and hear, but also disillusioned with the establishment. And our aim is going to be to right that wrong by saying, look, you can actually understand our policies. And then maybe someone turns around and says, but I don't trust politicians. Okay, so you don't trust the politicians because the establishment have lied to you. This is a common theme. Well, we're going to overturn that through frontline activism. So that kind of links with being the voice for the voiceless, and also, again, the party of grassroots, as you say as well. But I really would encourage people in the utility of us speaking, including yourself, Godfrey, is to understand more about where I'm coming from, the policies that we've got in place, our missions, and of course our manifesto as well.
Right, that's most interesting. I was always a bit slightly bewildered because I lost touch with the party in 2014. I went my own way and became an independent because I really couldn't understand, where it was going. It seems to lose touch with its original purpose, which was very libertarian, very low regulation, very small government. Obviously, Brexit was the main plank. That was the main thing. And I watched it drift away from that over the years, including under Nigel's leadership. It drifted away. And all sorts of weirdos turned up, like the party chairman, Steve Crowther, for example. He was clearly working for the government. I mean, it was painfully obvious that he wasn't working for UKIP. And there were other characters who I'd get into head office and I would find, who's he? And I'd find that I'm trying to scrub round getting 10 quid from old age pensioners in Yorkshire. And I've met a dude on 50 grand a year in London who I've never heard of, who Nigel sacked 6 months later because he was no good. And that went on and on and on. And gradually it was losing its way. I think the implication in what you were saying, that when Nigel went, it collapsed. It lost its direction. A few years before that, it had lost direction. So I think what would be fruitful is, has it gone back to a broadly small government libertarian type of policy, which is how it started out? And if you look at the original UKIP constitution, libertarian featured quite high. And then all of a sudden, people were joining who believed in mass nationalisation, or refugees from the Conservative Party, all sorts of flotsam and jetsam of the political scene. And that's when it started to decline. I think it's quite wrong to suggest, or people believe it declined because Nigel left it. It was on Skid Row then. And of course, what we've got to bear in mind, in spite of sweeping the board at the European elections, it got nowhere at all in the Westminster elections because it didn't provide anything than a one-man band. There was no shadow cabinet. There was no nothing. People said, well, I love UKIP and I'm voting for the European elections, but they don't have anything else in the package. It's Nigel Farage only, and Nigel's, a great bloke, a great patriot. But the point is, he really didn't know how to run a general election. He didn't really know how to run a Westminster election. You have to present to the electorate your policies and some people capable of being a shadow or part maybe of a joint government, who could be a chancellor or could at least be a junior minister in some way. And that wasn't presented. The only place that was presented, in my view, was perhaps in Wales, where it was very strong. UKIP was strong right up until the death in Wales. And I never quite understood why it went away in Wales, because when you look at the government in Cardiff, for example, it was absolutely disastrous. I mean, it is still disastrous. The Conservative Party is disastrous in Wales, as it is everywhere else, which is why they got booted out. So here we have a huge opportunity, and somehow the Welsh electorate were the last to abandon it. I suppose, there must be reasons for that, which I don't understand. I know Wales well, and I love Wales, but I've never understood why they turned their back on UKIP just when UKIP was the obvious choice. Do tell me how you feel.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there's a number of things in there that are really important, and I'd like to respond to. The first is that the ending for a lot of people was precisely 8 years ago, and you're now going back to 9, 10, 11 years ago, and rightly so. So where we're at the moment is got this incredible, and what attracted me to talk to join the party and to talk more with the party was what does UKIP stand for now? So if you look through, so go back 6-7 months ago, whilst I was actually looking more at UKIP rather than just being aware of it, you see the word libertarian an awful lot. Liberal, libertarian. It's what you see, and if you speak to ex-kippers, you'll hear it, and it's kind of the MO of the organisation, and it's about being a proper, actual small C conservative party. So it seems to me that as long as the Conservatives behave the way they've behaved, arguably since the 90s or since Thatcher, if the Conservatives continue to behave the way they're going to behave, they're obviously part of the establishment, 200 years or whatever. The reality is there's always going to be someone biting at the ankles. Like Reform now is biting at the ankles. They're not right wing, they're liberals, they're libertarians. They want to clean up on that vote. That's been made very clear to me for a long time. But specifically in the last few months, what's come out of high command at Reform is clearly that they want the Tory establishment disgruntled vote. And it seems to me, I think you've clarified it, Godfrey, but also I'm aware of you in terms of UKIP's purpose. As you say, it wasn't just the one plank. There were other things wrong as well. It seems to me that where we are now, in light of the rise of Islamism, the rise of the far left, the legitimization of the grievance brigade, which is the Marxists, the anarchists, the unholy alliance with Islamism, communists, etc., strikes me that the culture war, which wasn't waged by us, it was actually waged by the establishment, by mass importing the third world, which no one voted for. Strikes me that the vision can only be one which I've been conjuring up for a good few years now, is culture first, economy second. So at the moment, the establishment obviously loves money. It hates culture. It's all about money. It's all libertarian, live and let live, stand for everything, stand for nothing. No Christianity focus whatsoever. We couldn't be in a worse off state. So it seems to me like money actually, yes, it's not about saying there's no economy and we don't need to talk about the economy, but it's about saying we don't have our own house in order, both at street level and at the national. And that's what people want. People want and need to be led, and rightly so. We're going to give the people what they want. And I'm happy to talk more about those 6 missions, but we're living in a different time now entirely. And you're quite right to say that Nigel's departure wasn't the only. Nigel probably wanted to leave. I've heard lots of different stories about the state of the party and who was involved with the party. And I think UKIP was always, because of how it positions itself on the right, it is the most sort of legitimized right-wing party, which is certainly something that couldn't be considered extremist or far right. So that is a bridge, obviously, to the far right. That is a bridge to extremists. So what becomes incredibly important, and Labour would have had this junction arrive at their doorstep as well, is how do you keep on the left, how do you keep the communists out and the Marxists and the anarchists, and on the right, how do you keep the full-blown neo-Nazis out? That's what I mean when I say far right, for you and your listeners understanding. I mean the full-blown neo-Nazis. Okay, so we denounce those that demographic. So if you're happy and it suits, shall I just rattle off some of these missions that we're talking about to place all this in context, Godfrey?
Yes, please do.
Just for the context, there's 6. They're short and snappy. If people don't want to wade through the 106-page manifesto, I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that? It's a great exercise to do. Number 1 is to declare war on far left extremism, on the communists, on the Marxists, in our institutions, taxpayer-funded public sector, and also within society. Fight and defeat the main proponents of the culture war and call out and educate on far left totalitarian propaganda. That's obviously very important because, as we see, I believe October 7th, we are now Monday, October 7th. We're on the anniversary of the Hamas massacre last year. And far left, just a little segue here, far left totalitarian propaganda is something that's got to be, and as far as I'm concerned, in any conservative or patriotic manifesto or missions right now, because a year on, and you can see the vitriol and the quite demonic approach that the grassroots and many other generations are now taking with regards to that which they think didn't actually happen on October 7th, and how somehow Hamas and Hezbollah are actually freedom fighters and they are actually the good people whilst we know the expansionist ideology that is Islam, Northern Africa, the Middle East, Europe, etc. The left and the liberals with their virtue signaling, they don't seem to quite understand that those geopolitical facts about the expansionist, empiricist, and supremacist nature of Islam, and actually bolster with them. They actually support them, and they can do no wrong. So that far left totalitarian propaganda needs to be spoken of a lot more. Number two is to freeze immigration.
Can I just perhaps interject just on that one, Nick? I don't dispute anything that you said there, because it's true. But of course, on the other side, we have expansionist Zionism, don't we? I mean, there's a flip side of this coin, isn't there? And so we have a problem by involving ourselves in both. And I would argue, would we not have the establishment, as it were, is owned in the main by pro-Zionists, self-confessed pro-Zionists like David Cameron, so on and so forth, in the Foreign Office. And then on the other side, we have the push now because we have more Muslims in the country now in Great Britain than we have Welshmen, for example. So we have a huge political dynamic there. Would it not make sense to say, plague on both your houses, please? Not you and not you. Let's concentrate on Britain. Same, one might argue, with the Ukraine. Let us concentrate on our own island here and what affects it here. And there are flip sides to the coin. So you have a huge presence, if you will, on the street by the Islam or pro-Islam wing, and a huge problem with banking and institutions with the Zionist view. Certainly I would argue that you can't address one without addressing the other. Would that not be fair?
Yeah, so you've presented me now with an opportunity to park talking about mission number 2 and to address something that's of the utmost importance to me. So let me be very clear to your audience. When I'm at Speaker's Corner, promoting Christianity, and I'm often a speaker with regards to a Christian activist organization that's just launched in the UK. If there was neutrality, if the Islamists and those peaceful moderate Muslims, both, because I see them as very different things, if those people said to me, it's awful what's happening 2,500 miles away, war is terrible, man can be evil, and it is the Holy Land for Christians as well, this must really affect you as well. If that was their approach, I'd say, do you know what? You've just been kind and courteous, and I agree. But I am also about Christianity and Britain as a priority. So let's shake hands and we can all agree to disagree and walk the other way. I've kind of surmised there. That didn't happen. Again, I'll note that the date is October 7th. For 1 year, I have experienced the most awful vitriol from people. And it goes something like this. When I say people, I mean liberals, I mean Islamists, and I also mean peaceful, moderate Muslims. They say to me this: whose side are you on? They have the audacity to say to me, what side am I on? And then they ask me to choose a side. And then they dare question me. And bearing in mind, last year we launched our campaign. This was under Turning Point at the Cenotaph, where we were there at least once, if not twice a month, until April of this year, where we would stand there, and this is all available online to see. We would stand there as those marches came past us. We'd have our England flags, our GB flags, we'd have veterans there, and obviously we tallied up with the police. We were peaceful, but we would stand there and we would get into the most horrific situations in terms of confrontation. So I find the situation absolutely abhorrent. Why am I being asked as a patriot, as someone who's British and a Christian, to pick a side over there? So let's be very clear. Ukraine, Russia, great example. Israel, Palestine, another great example. We saw our own country out first. We saw Britain out first. And then, as I gave in my speech on Saturday at the UKIP conference, we will also call out all international lobbying efforts which pervade and look to subvert and undermine our democracy. Our democracy is not for sale. And we will call out and say no to those lobby groups that have anti-Christian and anti-British sentiment and objectives. So your point is exactly my point but there's a point before that, is that it's all about the poor Palestinians, and Hamas are freedom fighters, and Hezbollah are freedom fighters. This a year ago, there was an opportunity to say, do you know what? I get it. I understand. It's really problematic. He said, she said, who started it? It's the Holy Land. It's a holy war. It's never going to end. There's a critical thinking aspect. And again, I've been studying this for a very, very long time. Bearing in mind when I was born and my upbringing, it's never going to end. It's the Holy Land. But that didn't happen. It was this terrorists are actually now freedom fighters, and we've got the Death to America campaign, and we've got the far left on US campuses as well. They're buying into the fact that there are no two sides here. They're buying into the fact that the grievance brigade is or Palestinian or Palestinian Solidarity Campaign or whatever, etc. The Islamic world is so persecuted. So you've got the threat of the caliphate in Britain and radical Islam in Britain, which is a clear and present danger. 45,000 on MI5's terror watch list, 39,000 are Islamists. 57 out of the 80 prescribed terrorist organizations are Islamic. The whole country, whether it's a conservative MP that said it or a commentator or an influencer who said it, it's factual. There's a clear and present danger. And then, as you rightly say, Godfrey, you mentioned, well, what about Zionism? And the problem is that I'm never asked about that element to it. I'm asked to pick a side. My side is Britain. My side is Christianity. Thank you for letting me respond to that. I hope that wasn't too much of a lengthy rant.
No, it's very interesting, because I mean, I see things, I have no brief for one side or the other. I happen to be a Christian, but that's neither here nor there. It's just that one of the problems I think we have, I'm sure you'd agree with this, that we have not had a free press for many years. We don't have a free press. It's bought and paid for. Congress is bought and paid for by Israel. We have this huge dynamic of the Zionist cause on one side, and we have the Islamist side on the other. Personally, my view is plague on both their houses, I have to say. I'm an Englishman, and that is my interest, English. Now, we are in danger. We are in danger of being sucked into a world war. Now, I'm a military historian, as you probably know, and I write and lecture on 1914 and how we were dragged in to a war which was nothing to do with us, nothing to do with British Empire. And I feel that at the moment we are getting very close to the same situation because, for example, we're supplying Israel from the Royal Air Force Base at Akrotiri. So that, we are already involved. We are already involved. And because we have stupidly allowed mass immigration, we have a dynamic here, if you will, one might argue a grassroots dynamic, which is opposed to these things. And it's deep into the system. So you have deep into wherever it's the bigger charities, whether it's newspapers, whether it's television. You always have somebody who is actually pushing an agenda which is not in the British interest. Almost never is anybody pushing the British interest. So would UKIP, for example, would it be, I know you mentioned October, I mean, I would like to talk about 1948, like it wasn't just last year. We're talking about last year. I mean, that is ludicrous. This has been going on and on now for a generation, if not two generations. So what I would want to see in a radical party, radical grassroots party, if I may suggest that, which is what I was a founder member of in UKIP, although radical, a radical libertarian party. So that's what I wanted. But I would really respond well, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, to somebody or a political party who would say, I want nothing to do with international geopolitics because no good can come of it. No good ever comes of it. And our 3 million war dead and maimed from 1914 to 18 proves that. No good ever comes of it. I do not want this country to be a total lapdog of the United States, which it is at the moment and has been for far too long. And I want to stop immediately any form of overseas spending. I do not want to see us send any money to the Ukraine. I don't want to see any of us £1 billion a month nearly to unaudited international aid, really black and white, up there in capital letters, if you will, a plague on all their houses. It's this country that matters most, not Israel, not the Ukraine, none of them. Let them all go their own way. Let them all go their own way. And if they want to eat each other, it's no skin off my nose. But I don't want my country sucked in. That's the kind of message. Would you be giving that clear message?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me jump straight to number 5, I believe, on the missions list. Let me just read this out for your audience. Challenge and stop the liberal. This is very, very important. Challenge and stop the liberal establishment and its ties to corporations who seek to profiteer off of the destruction of our culture, scrap net zero, fight back and say no to the globalist agenda of 2030. Now, these are our missions. Obviously, in the manifesto, it's far more in detail where required. Number 5 on the missions list is about supranational tyranny. It's about far left lobbying and climate change lobbying and net zero and corporatism. So the corporates want to see us living in pods, eating bugs, corporate drones, etc. So when we talk about putting Britain and the British people and Christianity first, that means not meddling in other people's affairs. So it's very simple. The epicenter of the grievance brigade, the epicenter of the far left, of the liberals, of the centre left, the epicenter. When I came out, when I arrived at the conference on Saturday in Nottingham, I was greeted by 20 of Socialist Worker Party, communists, Antifa, whatever you want to call them. And it's all there available online. I walked straight through them with the megaphone. I told them, as ever, you're not welcome here. Go away. How dare you try and harass and intimidate our members? Again, it's another attempt to subvert democracy. If you ask those people, why are you here? Same as when we're doing rallies at the Cenotaph, or if it's patriotic related, or if it's against Drag Queen Story Hour, like Turning Point did for all those months last year in Lewisham, where grown men and women were taking their children to allow their kids to watch homosexual men dressed as prostitutes twerk. When you ask these people, why are you doing this? Take the case of the Palestinian resistance in the UK. Why are you doing this? They say it's because of British imperialism. They say it's because we started everything. The West is responsible for everything. So when we get involved in international relations or geopolitics, what you're saying, Godfrey, is that the only thing that happens is lots of people die, everyone loses, and ultimately there's grievance, a historic grievance, which is passed down from father to son, and on these generational curses go. So let me be very clear. You wanted it in pink blinking neon, I can do that. We are in a state now where we are going to right the wrong of saying we are not interested, and this is all in the manifesto in more broken down terms and explainers, we are not interested in that which does not concern us. Now, I'll give you a flip side to that coin. There's a strong argument that when China does make its move on Taiwan, that's the distribution of microprocessors to the UK finished. And then all of a sudden, what are we going to do if we can't get micro? And I don't want to go, you're probably going to know a lot more about this than me. So to say that I would say end geopolitics, geopolitical warfare and strategy, no, I can't say that. Of course I can't. But your sentiment is understood by me. I've heard you, I've listened to you, and I completely agree. That's from my mouth, and it's in the manifesto. We are going to stop interfering outbound, and we are going to call out whether it's the Friends of America lobbying that goes on in the UK, or whether it's the Israel lobbying that goes on in the UK, or the climate change lobbying, or the Islamist. We've now got 25 Muslim MPs, and our Justice Secretary is a Muslim. When have you ever heard these people call out radical Islam? When have you ever heard these people in Parliament who have risen to a degree of power? A Justice Secretary is a Muslim in this country. When have you ever heard them call out for radical Muslim hate preachers to be locked up? The caliphate in Britain, you mentioned about the 4 million, more than Welsh in the UK. The colonized Arabized cities where I've done documentaries going to street level and exposing the Arabization of neighborhoods, the colonizing that we're witnessing. the caliphate in Britain is both the Islamist and the Muslim moderates' end goal. It's in their script. It's there. It's by the sword. So when we talk about lobbying and influence, you've put a heavy emphasis on Zionism. Absolutely. And I wish those people out there, those liberals and those left-wing fanatics, I wish they could listen to that and understand that. I'm British. I'm a Christian. This country comes first. We stop meddling outbound, and let's all have a conversation about understanding that this is very much a new dawn. We're a radical party, new ideas. We understand the mistakes of the past and stop asking people to pick sides. The audacity of first, second generation, third generation immigrants who are of the Islamic faith asking me to pick a side when Christians see that in Israel as our holy land. Actually, if you do your doctrinal research, I should say to these people, actually, that's our holy land. So I hope that makes sense, Godfrey.
Yes, it does, and I think that's nice and clear, and I certainly welcome it. On a more sort of broader historical note, tell me, and let me just say one thing. When I was in UKIP, I was a founder member. As close as makes no difference. As close as makes no difference. I was a founder member, and without question, I'm 75 now, and I've been in the army. You name it, I've done it. I've been around the world. I've done the whole, not because I'm a clever fellow, it's because I'm just old. So I've been everywhere and I've done everything. And I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, some of the nicest people I ever met across the country were grassroots UKIP members. They didn't get paid anything. They stood in the pouring rain, handing out leaflets when there was no hope. Freezing cold in November, late 1989, when there was no hope. And they did it because they were grassroots patriots, deeply betrayed by 2014 by the leadership of UKIP, deeply betrayed, and then badmouthed, would you believe? Badmouthed, which was extraordinary, ghastly and dreadful. And I was very, very angry about that. But it's without doubt some of the nicest people I ever met, and really, really good news. And how many have you retained, do you think, of that? Or how many would come back?
So two separate and very good questions. How many have we retained? I suppose somewhere around the 2,000 mark-ish. I don't have direct visibility over that, and it's changing, which kind of links actually to your second question, or your other question, rather. My forecast is there'll be a mass return home to UKIP. I guess this is the fun part this is the most fun part of our chat, Godfrey, is that if we understand from 1993 to 2016, we understand that the vast majority of people, me included, didn't know what an MEP was, didn't know about Brussels, didn't know about what did an MEP do, what did they earn, how were they treated, how did they change things over here. Most people didn't know, but there was a bubble going on where within that bubble, it was everything and all and one. But I didn't know about it. I didn't understand. I voted Brexit. Of course I did, but not that we've actually got that. So the strength of the brand and the prowess of the brand and those good people that you're referring to, those grassroots members, I'm inundated now. Texts, DMs, emails. If you dare, jump in the comment section on the cesspool that is Twitter. It's hard. But 90% of TikTok, Instagram, dealer's choice. Jump in the comment section on any one of my videos, on anything about policy or about the manifesto, or anything about our stance demonstrably through actual content, which is often quite confrontational with the far left and with liberals. Jump in the comment section. There's going to be a mass return home to UKIP because no one wanted UKIP to go anywhere. No one wanted UKIP to die or decline or go bankrupt. No one wanted that. For reasons that I know and you know, and you've said far more articulately than I could. No one wanted that. No one wants anything to do with the Conservative Party if they're a true patriot and right wing or Christian, socially conservative. Reform, the mask has slipped. It's not slipping. I gave them 24 months for the mask to slip. It's already slipped. No one wanted anything to go wrong with UKIP. We wanted to grow from strength to strength to strength. Now we're in a position, due to lots of moving parts coming together at the right time, I might add, to offer the public that. And so when I get those, to answer your question, when I get those DMs and those comments and those text messages and those emails and that correspondence. I'm there putting out fires. I'm there telling people their questions that they have about the NEC from yesteryear, their questions that they have about high command from yesteryear. I'm there explaining the timeline. I'm there explaining the position we're in now. We're incredibly solvent. We are nowhere near bankrupt. The UKIP story simply hasn't been told for the last 8 or so years, despite the political giants that have stood before me. It simply just hasn't been told, and that's for a lot of reasons we could get into at a later date. So that correspondence that's coming my way, people are really enjoying what I'm saying, and we're seeing the membership go up and up and up, and we're seeing the new people come through as well. Young lad at the conference, he said, I'm ready to start. He's come on his own dime to the conference. He's traveled across the county. I want to start. I saw your work online. Always enjoyed UKIP, but didn't really know necessarily what was going on, etc. So quite a young chap, knows what he's talking about though. And I'm here to help. I want to be an activist, etc. We're getting this sort of feedback in the last 4 or 5 months since I became interim, and whilst I was deputy as well. This is the feedback that we're getting. People are asking questions. Is UKIP still alive? Who's this guy? What's happening? There's a real buzz and a real excitement linked with our manifesto and our missions. There's a real buzz and an excitement, to your point about, do I think everyone's going to come home? Yeah, I do, because the reform mask has slipped.
Yeah, very interesting point that you make. I think the mask was only halfway up to start with, really, to be brutally frank.
Well, quite.
I don't take semantics, perhaps a little bit of issue with you. I don't like your American use of the term liberal. I'm a classical liberal in the mold of Gladstone, not the fake. It's the fake word. The Americans use it as a fake word. Liberal doesn't mean what people say, Americans say liberal is. That liberal is a term for extreme left. That was never classical liberalism. That's not where liberalism started. And I think it's a shame, because I always argued that UKIP, when we won the referendum, and of course you're absolutely right, we haven't got Brexit or anything like it, we were never going to. I said, you know, on all my speeches and lectures and stuff that I gave, we'd never get it. Even if we won the referendum, we'd never get it. We haven't got it. It's Brino, as we all know. But leaving that aside, that's everybody watching this clip knows that. You know,
I know.
So it's bullshit. But the natural name for UKIP, when we got that referendum, was the New Liberal Party, in the mode of Gladstone. You know, that's really, or one might argue, of course, Lord Salisbury. If you read Lord Salisbury's speeches in the late 1890s, he was a libertarian. And if you read his quotes, which if any of the viewers here today, and I've been banging the drum, and any of your followers, you look up, if you can find an old book, the Oxford Book of Quotations, an old one, because it's steamed out of the modern one. What a surprise that is. The quotes of Lord Salisbury. One I particularly like is when he was being pressured by the Temperance Society. He said it's the right of every freeborn Englishman to get as drunk as he likes. It's nobody's business but his own. And that's very much my view of libertarianism, is leave me alone.
Sure.
I mean, I don't want to register. I have a small holding here in East Yorkshire. You want me to register my chickens? Why? Why? So you can come and pull their necks when big business tells you that, you know, we want to put the price of eggs up, but people have got their own eggs from their own villages. Well, we know where they all are. These are the sort of grassroots problems that we have at the moment, with the world getting into. I'm standing up against the drainage board in a month's time. They're taking me to court, but I'm taking them to court. You know, we've got these things that they're telling me that I have to pay. They're a corporation. They're a registered corporation. And all I've done is said, would you please give me an invoice, a VAT friendly, and under the 1882 Bills Act, give me a proper invoice. Who are you? Who are you? And these people, they just take her to court and think that you're going to bow down. Well, they picked the wrong bloke with me.
Oh, well,
but It's a shame, and I pick up on that point, liberal, because I think it's like gay. You know, nothing gay about it. There's nothing gay about it. Gay is friendly and happy and fun and parties. That's gay. Let's have a gay time. That's another hijack word which crawls up my nostrils. But anyway, that's slightly.
I'd really like to respond to that. So I've been pulled up on this before, and it's a conversation I actually really enjoy. I'm aware of the hijacking of the words and how that disgruntles certain people. Those people are typically going to be slightly older because they know their history perhaps slightly better than other people in general. When the subject about the use of the word liberal comes up, I totally understand that. I guess what we deem as there are many heads of the snake in terms of our collective decline: corporatism, lobbying, far left extremism, the communists, Islamists. There are many heads on the snake. I believe one of them is liberalism and godlessness. So let me use the word liberalism, perhaps, and let me draw your attention to the 2013 Marriage Act, the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, the 2010 Equality Act. All of this from the Second World War onwards, from the hippie movement to Woodstock to how good the boomers had it compared with the millennials now. There are people with massive grievances, my age, younger, a bit older, a bit younger, etc. There's an element within Western society which embraces an element, it's a consistency where liberalism is accepted, live and let live. As long as it's behind closed doors, I don't mind. What the millennials are brought up with, there's this link undeniably between liberalism and godlessness. And I think we've fallen from grace. I think we've severed our relationship. I mean, this is what happens at the individual level as well. If you sever your relationship with God, this is what happens. You displease God. So whereas I'm not an evangelist, and I certainly wouldn't spend too much time speaking like this, but I'm happy to address it to your point. Perhaps I'm using the word liberal sometimes incorrectly. It's liberalism and godlessness and degeneracy and a complete and total lack of Christian morals and values in society. It is Christian values and morals in society which made Britain great and indeed made the West great. And I mean great, healthy, sometimes happy. Happiness shouldn't be the end goal. I think duty should be first and happiness should be second. Indeed, happiness is a byproduct of duty, my personal thoughts and feelings. I believe we've fallen from grace and we need to right the wrongs of liberalism. Liberalism is how tyranny arrives. Liberalism, equality, the individual rights. And I'd link this to a lot of what Thatcher said. And I could talk to you about abortion as well. I find it hugely problematic and we need to sort it out. I hope that makes sense, Godfrey.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just an extension of that before we wind up, and we can talk again. So whatever's not covered today, we'll see what the feedback is from everybody on this. Just picking up on that point, as a boomer, born in 1949, there are certain institutions with which I have completely lost faith, and one, of course, is the Church of England. The Catholic faith seems to be going much the same way. These and some of the great charities, the BBC is an institution which has been going wrong for some time, all have been infiltrated, but not in a rather funny way that it's sort of morphed. You know, you can't get the National Trust is a classical example. I was part of the movement to try and put the trust back in the National Trust. People seem to become left-wing radicalized at university. Everybody now in every single position is middle-class university educated. And my experience when people used to come to my dinner parties who were in Oxford, which they don't now, lost them all, no great loss. They just think they just don't understand. They can't debate. I mean, I spoke to an old friend of mine, Oxford, about my age, failed barrister. In fact, no wonder he failed. Totally incapable of either understanding my point of view or constructing his own. You know,
Mm.
they sort of freeze up when you start talking about some of the values or the history of the country, or the basic knowledge of that came up with the rations at a grammar school in the 1950s about slavery, the abolition of slavery, the principles of English law, all these things. I have many a friend at from the big universities, not the Mickey Mouse, big universities, who are incapable of discussing these matters from one side or the other.
Mm.
From one side or the other, they have no ability. And of course, now we have a government, and I did when I was doing, I still do a bit of this debating at Durham University or speaking on platforms or any questions or something like that, which I don't do so much of now because I'm not in office. These people are incapable of any form of discussion. You get a better discussion from the artisan class, which is you go to the local pub. I have a local pub, very good pub. It's what they call a tea time pub. It's full of artisans who get there at 4. They start to work at 8 and they like a few pints and they go home at 7 or 6:30. They are all chippies or brickies or sparkies, nearly all one-man bands.
Sure.
And you will get a much, much higher standard of debate in that pub than you will in a southern middle-class pub.
Yeah, I'd like to.
They're capable, and this, I was just think, they are the natural, or were then in my day, the natural UKIP supporter. Indeed, in Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire, when I first stood, when I first became an activist for UKIP in Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire, it was me, my mother-in-law, and my dog. That was it. That was it. And we went from 120,000 votes in 2004 to 2014, 400,000 votes, and swept the board.
Yeah.
That was basically me, and then the grassroots who started branch offices and did this, and they were all. In fact, here's something which the press always overlooked, because they couldn't deal with it in their head. They were nearly all old Labour. They were nearly all old Labour, betrayed old Labour from the northern Yorkshire, from the Yorkshire towns.
Yeah.
And some of them were actually in office. They were sort of the branch chairman of the local Labour Party. So that is, you'll get more common sense from an artisan, because he's a businessman, a small businessman, and he's also time served, probably.
Yeah, I completely agree.
This is where the vote is. Who are abandoned, and this is a mistake I think the Reform are making, and they're making many. Getting rid of Ben Habib was one of them. But certainly they make these mistakes, as they always seem to do under the sort of leadership that there is. These people will not involve themselves with the working class. The abandoned white working class people who the Labour Party have abandoned. And they are there in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are homeless politically. And that's the recruitment ground for UKIP, in my view. As it was when I started. As it was when I started. That's where this is where it all came from. And the betrayal came from professionalization. Now, this word professionalization is an interesting word. I'm going to professionalize the party. Well, you check the demise of UKIP, the first UKIP one, as it were. The demise started when they tried to professionalize it. They got rid of all the honest, hardworking, straightforward sparkies and brickies and people like that, and replaced them with all sorts of weirdos on big salaries in London who I'd never heard of, who were sacked within 6 months. And it seems to me they've learned nothing. They've learned nothing. It's the same kind of leadership now that UKIP had towards the end of its first run in the 2014-2015. Nobody wants professional politicians. The whole point of reform should be no professional politicians, no professional sort of spokesman, no professional PR spinners and all the rest of it. That's where the key is, and people want that. They're begging for that. Their arms are open to receive that. And I believe personally that Reform have completely dropped the pass. It was a gift. It was an open goal.
It's the gift that Reform is the gift that keeps on giving, Godfrey. It's I forecasted it. We had the Tommy Robinson rally on the 1st of we had St George's Day, then we had 1st of June, which was Parliament Square, then we had Trafalgar Square, which was round 2, and then we had the general election. So it's hang in there time, and then a lot of influencers, a lot of pundits, a lot of analysts, a lot of commentators, they all back Reform. Now those inside the tent who understand Nigel's MO and Reform's agenda, we're just sitting waiting. And I gave it 24 months for the mask to slip. As you say, the mask was only ever half up. The mask has now fully slipped. And to your point, what can I say? Reform is, I gave it 24 months. We've only got 5 years. We've got a lot of work to do. You've got 60 months. The clock is ticking massively. So Reform behaving in a way that is problematic for us has been a disaster. And instead, they've behaved exactly as I forecasted. So the gift that keeps on giving, Reform our establishment. Their liberal centre right establishment, Tories, big business, professional. This you used the word professionalization. I mean, look, when they threw out Gwaine Towler, I mean, for all I know, it was time to bring someone else in. I spoke to Gwaine. Maybe it was, but again, Ben Habib. This is problematic. Richard Tice firing people on GB News. These are PPCs without even speaking to them first because they found a Facebook meme or graphic that they didn't particularly like. Firing people for this is demonstrable for the last 12 months. Anyone who doesn't fit their particular centre ground, centre right narrative, etc. But that the people want something radical. They want a radical right-wing solution. Let's just call it what it is: concerned citizen, patriot, small c conservative, Christian, whatever you want to call it. Again, back to our missions. We're going to put Christianity back into the heart of government. That means Christian values. So, like you say, open goal. They've gone, no thanks. We're going to stick with this. And then there's myself and UKIP saying, oh, this is a bit early, but thank you. And then we're going to begin our roadshow in our key target seats. Those people that you spoke about, we're going to be speaking to those people, and we're going to be asking for their vote. And the rent is due every day on trust, loyalty, and respect. So we'll see what happens in the future. But our missions are clear. The manifesto has been rejigged and is ready to launch. We're rebranding, and there's everything to play for. And in 5 years' time, we are voting our way out of this mess.
Well, good luck, Nick. I mean that, as Huey Green used to say before you were born, probably. I mean that most sincerely, folks.
I remember. I know.
Thanks again, Nick.
Thank you so much for your time, Godfrey.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.